Have you ever judged someone so quickly, so confidently, only to discover that life had prepared a twist you never saw coming? Well, today's story begins with an invitation meant to humiliate, and ends with an unforgettable entrance that stunned an entire wedding. Intent to harm reveals character in its purest form. When a person deliberately sets out to embarrass, belittle, or humiliate someone else, they expose more about their inner world than they do about the target of their cruelty. In this story, the groom's decision to invite his ex-wife with the hidden intention of shaming her was not simply an act of pettiness. It was a window into his values, his insecurities, and the unresolved bitterness he carried like a shadow behind him. To the outside world, he appeared successful, well-dressed, financially stable, surrounded by friends, and preparing to start a new chapter of life with someone new. But beneath the polished surface lingered something darker. Instead of gratitude for his new beginning, he clung to resentment from the past. Instead of celebrating the joy of marriage, he focused his energy on orchestrating a moment designed to hurt someone who once stood beside him through struggle. Choosing humiliation over healing is not an accident. It is a deliberate reflection of a person's emotional maturity. People often believe that power lies in status, wealth, or material accomplishments. But true power is revealed by how compassionately, or cruelly, we treat people who once had access to our hearts. Inviting his ex-wife wasn't just a gesture, it was a message. He wanted her to stand there, surrounded by guests, and feel small. He wanted her to see what he believed she had missed out on. Perhaps he imagined she would arrive quietly, wearing something modest or outdated, reminding everyone that she belonged to a past he had long outgrown. Perhaps he believed her presence would highlight the contrast between his new, polished life and the struggles she was facing after their separation. But this desire itself revealed the hollowness of his achievements. A person who feels genuinely fulfilled, who is stable and at peace with their choices, does not need to diminish others to feel victorious. A confident man does not find pleasure in the humiliation of someone he once vowed to protect. The very act of planning someone's embarrassment at his own wedding, a day meant for love, respect, and unity, exposed that he was not celebrating joy, he was celebrating escape, and that is not the mindset of a person who has healed from the past, but one still held captive by it. Intent is powerful because it reflects internal truth. When someone chooses harm, it signals unresolved wounds, a fragile ego, or a deep fear of being seen as inadequate. The groom's desire to shame his ex-wife likely stemmed from insecurity. Perhaps she knew a version of him that he wanted desperately to forget. She had seen him at his lowest during times of struggle, failure, or vulnerability. In his mind, reminding others of that past diminished the image he wanted to portray. So instead of acknowledging his growth, he attempted to erase the evidence of where he came from by pushing her down. This kind of behavior often appears in people who believe success is a performance, not a journey. They think that if they spotlight someone else's struggles, their own achievements will shine brighter. But human character doesn't work that way. The light of success should illuminate others, not blind them. And the moment you use your accomplishments to shame someone, those accomplishments lose their meaning. In fact, his actions revealed precisely what he hoped no one would notice, that he had not grown at all. He had changed his clothes, his partner, his surroundings, but not his heart. A changed life is not the same as a changed character. And in trying to humiliate her, he humiliated himself by showing the world that beneath the surface of his celebration, bitterness still ruled him. Intent to harm is also a mirror. It reflects how a person sees themselves. When he targeted his ex-wife, he saw her as someone beneath him, someone who could be used as a prop in his attempt to appear superior. But the moment someone views another human being as a tool for their ego, they reveal their lack of empathy. They show that they measure worth by comparison rather than compassion. They reveal that they misunderstand success at its core. True success is quiet. It does not need an audience. It does not need someone else to stand lower so you can stand higher. Success with integrity uplifts, inspires, and radiates confidence. Success built on trampling others is fragile. It shakes the moment truth walks into the room. His intent to shame her also carried an assumption that she would remain in the exact place he left her, that she would still be struggling, still be vulnerable, still be easy to mock. Underestimating someone's resilience is another sign of failing character. People grow, transform, and rise, often in ways unseen by those who choose cruelty over kindness. He believed the past defined her because he was still defined by his own. This is how intent exposes character. A person who aims to hurt shows fear. A person who aims to embarrass shows insecurity. A person who aims to belittle shows weakness. And as the story unfolds, it becomes undeniable that his intention to shame her did not reveal her flaws. It revealed his. Life has unexpected plot twists, and often, the people we believe will remain in the shadows end up stepping into the brightest light. In this story, the groom believed he had everything figured out. He imagined himself in control, orchestrating a moment that would highlight his newfound success while exposing what he believed to be his ex-wife's shortcomings. But life, with all its unpredictability, crafted a moment so powerful that it shattered his expectations in an instant. This is the beauty of the unexpected, the way it humbles, surprises, and reminds us that no story is ever as linear as we assume. The groom's plan was simple: invite her, let her stand among the crowd, and let the contrast between their lives speak loudly. He saw her as someone stuck in same circumstances, struggling as she had during the years they were together. He didn't consider the possibility that she might have rebuilt herself, regained her strength, or risen above the hardships he believed defined her. His view of her was frozen in time, trapped in the version of her he thought he left behind. But life does not keep people in one place forever. Life's most dramatic and meaningful plot twists often happen far from the eyes of those who once doubted us. Growth is not always loud. Transformation does not always announce itself. Sometimes, strength is rebuilt in quiet rooms, new opportunities appear in unexpected moments, and blessings arrive just when everything seems impossible. When the ex-wife stepped out of the limousine, she embodied every silent victory she had earned, victories he never bothered to imagine, because he never believed she was capable of them. People often underestimate others because they assume that change is difficult and therefore improbable. But life teaches us that the human spirit is resilient. It bends, it struggles, it breaks, but it always finds a way to rise. No setback is permanent unless we allow it to be. No failure is final unless we stop trying. Those who expect others to remain the same are projecting their own stagnant mindset. The groom assumed she was still living the life she had when they separated, overlooking the fact that people evolve, circumstances shift, and time works on all wounds. The limousine was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of transformation. It represented the distance she had traveled, not just in wealth or status, but in confidence, self-worth, and stability. And the sight of the triplets stepping out behind her was the sharpest twist of all. It shook the foundation of the narrative he had created in his mind. While he saw her as someone beneath him, she had not only rebuilt her life, but had built a world where their children were cared for, loved, and thriving. Life had woven her story in ways he never anticipated. This unexpected turn also revealed something crucial: that judgment is often based on incomplete information. The groom judged her without knowing the full story. He judged her based on what he believed to be true, not what was actually true. We often make this mistake, assuming that someone's present mirrors their past, assuming that their silence is weakness, assuming that their struggles mean they are failing. But people grow in ways unseen. They learn, adapt, and rise quietly. And when their moment comes, it arrives with the force of truth, leaving those who doubted them stunned and unprepared. Life's plot twists are also reminders that destiny does not follow human expectations. The groom expected his wedding to be flawless, his ego to go unchallenged, and his cruelty to go unnoticed by everyone. But life has its own timing and its own justice. Sometimes, the people we dismiss return with strength we never saw coming. Sometimes, the situations we believe we control slip out of our hands. And sometimes, life reveals a truth at exactly the moment it needs to be seen. The shock on the guests' faces was not just because she arrived in a limousine. It was because everything they assumed about the situation was suddenly flipped. They thought they knew why she had been invited. They thought they understood her place in his story, but with one unexpected entrance, their entire perception shifted. The power dynamics he tried to manipulate were overturned in seconds, and instead of her being embarrassed, he became the one exposed. Life's unexpected twists serve another purpose. They humble those who believe they can outrun consequences. The groom thought he had escaped his past actions. He thought he had moved on without accountability. But life has a way of bringing the truth forward, especially when someone tries to hide it behind pride or pretense. Her arrival with the triplets was not just dramatic. It was the reveal of a truth he tried to bury. And perhaps the most profound element of this twist is that she didn't orchestrate it to humiliate him. Her intention was not revenge. That is what made the twist even more powerful. She wasn't calculating or vindictive. She was simply living her life, raising her children, and carrying herself with the dignity he lacked. The fact that her genuine strength overshadowed his planned cruelty showcased how life rewards authenticity and exposes pettiness without us needing to force it. Unexpected plot twists remind us that the world does not revolve around the plans of the arrogant. Destiny moves with quiet certainty, shaping outcomes long before we realize it. Those who walk with humility often find themselves rising without even trying, while those who walk with arrogance often stumble on their own intentions. Dignity is not defined by wealth, and in this story, dignity becomes the quiet force that reshapes the entire moment. When the ex-wife stepped out of the limousine, many people saw the surface-level contrast, the once poor woman arriving in a symbol of luxury, but the limousine itself was not what reflected her dignity. Dignity is deeper, quieter, and far more powerful than the things money can buy. It is the way a person carries themselves, the choices they make when treated unfairly, and the integrity with which they move through the world, regardless of their financial situation. The groom had convinced himself that wealth alone would elevate him above her. In his mind, money was the measure of worth, and status was the currency of superiority. He believed that because he now had a more glamorous life, a more beautiful wedding, and a partner who fit his ideal image of success, he had risen above his past. But dignity cannot be purchased or worn like a suit. It is woven from character, humility, and resilience, qualities she possessed long before she ever stepped into a limousine. During the marriage, she had endured hardship with patience. She had stood by him when times were difficult, when the future looked uncertain, and when money was scarce. The struggles they went through together had shaped her into someone who understood the value of loyalty and perseverance. Yet he mistook her quiet strength for weakness. He mistook her sacrifices for insignificance, and in doing so, he misunderstood what dignity really is. Dignity shows itself most clearly when a person chooses grace over revenge. She could have exploited the moment. She could have aired every painful truth, confronted him publicly, or used her newfound appearance to lash out. But she didn't. When she stepped out of the limousine, she held her head high, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. Her posture, her calm expression, and the gentle way she guided the triplets reflected a woman who had rebuilt her life not with bitterness, but with quiet determination. True dignity means knowing your worth even when others fail to see it. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her life, her growth, and her children were proof enough of the strength she carried within her. Her dignity was not forged in wealth. It was forged in every challenge she overcame, in every moment she chose not to break, and in every sacrifice she made silently. On the other hand, the groom's behavior exposed his lack of dignity. Wealth had not given him grace. Instead, it magnified his insecurity. He believed that money made him superior, but the very act of inviting someone to humiliate them revealed a hollowness that no amount of financial success could fill. Dignity is demonstrated through kindness, empathy, and accountability, none of which he displayed when he turned his wedding invitation into a weapon of shame. The guests, too, witnessed the stark difference between wealth and dignity. In that moment, the contrast became unavoidable. While he stood surrounded by luxury, he appeared small in character. Meanwhile, she stood with very little effort on her part, radiating a strength he had never recognized. People in the crowd whispered, not about her supposed poverty, but about the extraordinary composure she displayed despite the circumstances. This is where the deeper truth emerges. Dignity elevates a person higher than wealth ever can. People admire strength of character more than they admire expensive displays. They remember integrity longer than they remember lavish events. They respect those who show grace in the face of cruelty far more than they respect those who flaunt success. She did not conquer the moment through money. She conquered it through character. Dignity also means refusing to let someone else decide your value. The groom had painted her in his mind as someone beneath him, someone he could parade in front of his new life as a symbol of what he had escaped. But she had written her own story. She had built a life that reflected who she truly was, not who he believed her to be. Her presence at the wedding was not a submission to his narrative. It was a quiet statement that she lived by her own strength, not by his judgment. Another powerful aspect of dignity is how it transforms perception. Before she arrived, many probably shared his assumptions. They imagined her struggling, ashamed, or fragile. But her entrance shifted the energy of the entire event. Her dignity forced everyone to reevaluate their assumptions, to question the story they had been told, and to recognize that wealth does not define worth. In that moment, people saw who truly held power, and it wasn't the groom. She didn't need designer clothes or extravagant jewelry to appear dignified. Her dignity came from within, reflected in her calmness, her poise, and her refusal to be drawn into the drama he had planned. Even the way she held children communicated stability, love, and confidence, qualities far greater than anything money could ever purchase. Dignity is also evident in the choices we make when we have every right to be angry. She had every right to resent him, to feel hurt by his intentions, and to confront him publicly. But she chose peace. She chose silence where others might choose confrontation. She chose to present her truth not through words, but through presence. And sometimes presence speaks louder than accusations. Through all of this, it becomes abundantly clear. Wealth may change someone's lifestyle, but dignity changes how they live their life. It is the invisible crown that cannot be taken away, the inner strength that cannot be stolen, and the quiet confidence that cannot be overshadowed by cruelty. Her dignity turned an intended humiliation into a moment of undeniable empowerment. The power of grace over revenge is one of the most profound forces a person can wield, and in this story, the ex-wife's grace becomes the element that transforms everything. While the groom plotted humiliation, crafted a moment intended to sting, and prepared to showcase her as a symbol of failure, she arrived with a calmness so strong that it overshadowed every cruel intention. Grace, unlike revenge, doesn't need noise. It doesn't need confrontation. It doesn't need to strike back to make its presence known. Grace works in silence, yet it speaks louder than any accusation ever could. When she stepped out of the limousine, she did not carry bitterness in her eyes. There was no anger, no smugness, no desire to make a scene. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that instantly disarmed the tension surrounding her arrival. Revenge would have looked different. Revenge would have demanded attention, demanded drama, demanded an audience. Grace, however, simply arrived, calm, soft, but powerful enough to shift the entire atmosphere. Many people believe strength comes from striking back, from proving a point, or from exposing someone's wrongdoing. But true strength is shown when a person chooses restraint even when justified anger burns inside them. She had every right to confront him, to tell the guests how he abandoned her, how he ignored his responsibilities, how he tried to erase the existence of their triplets. She had every right to embarrass him in return, and yet she chose not to. That choice alone elevated her above his intentions. Grace is not weakness. Grace is control. It is the ability to walk into a room knowing you have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. It is choosing peace when chaos would be easier. It is standing firmly in your truth without throwing stones. Her grace said more about her character than any dramatic confrontation ever could. Revenge might have satisfied a moment, but her grace transformed the entire narrative. The groom expected to see shame on her face. Instead, he saw confidence. He expected her to shrink under the stares of his guests. Instead, she stood tall. He expected her to walk in alone, silently proving his point. Instead, she walked in with their triplet. living proof that she had carried responsibility he once abandoned. Revenge would have been loud, but Grace made the truth visible. Without a single word, people often underestimate the impact of Grace because it doesn't look like a victory. It doesn't look triumphant or dramatic, but what it does is far more powerful. It exposes the character of both sides. His cruelty became clear and her strength became undeniable. Grace shines a spotlight on the truth without needing to expose anyone deliberately. It allows the truth to reveal itself naturally, and that is exactly what happened. As the guests saw the triplets, as they watched her calm demeanor, as they observed his shock and discomfort, they didn't need explanations. Grace doesn't require narration. It lets others draw their own conclusions, and those conclusions often hit harder than anything spoken aloud. Her grace showed that she had healed. Revenge thrives in unhealed wounds, but grace grows where healing has already taken place. She had moved on from the hurt he caused. She had built a stable life, raised her children, and embraced her own growth. She didn't need to hurt him to feel whole. She was already whole before she arrived. Revenge wants to level the playing field. Grace rises above it. Her calmness also demonstrated emotional maturity. To attend the wedding at all required strength. It required a willingness to face a painful past, to walk into a situation set up against her, and to do so with dignity rather than defensiveness. Lesser hearts would have declined the invitation. Bitter hearts would have used the moment to retaliate, but she rose above both options, and that is what turned the moment into something unforgettable. Grace also protects the innocent. Her children stood beside her, watching how she handled the situation. Children learn not by words alone, but by watching actions, reactions, and especially how their parents handle adversity. Had she chosen revenge, she would have taught them bitterness. Instead, she taught them courage, dignity, and the strength of composure. In her quiet presence, the triplets saw an example they would carry for life. That you do not need to harm others to prove your worth. The guests, too, felt the difference. They came expecting a celebration, not a showdown. Her grace honored the moment, even though she had every reason to disrupt it. Many in the room likely began to question the groom's intentions, noticing the difference between his smug expectations and her peaceful strength. Grace has a way of revealing who truly stands tall. And while revenge might triumph for a moment, grace triumphs in memory. People forget moments of anger, but they never forget moments when someone displayed strength through kindness. Her behavior created an unspoken moral contrast between her and the groom, one that would linger far longer than the wedding itself. Grace doesn't need to win. It simply needs to be present, and when it is, it quietly shifts the balance of power. Her presence, her poise, and her refusal to retaliate turned an attempted humiliation into an unforgettable display of inner strength. She turned a cruel plan into a moment of truth, not through revenge, but through unwavering grace. Children reflect hidden truths, and in this story, the presence of the triplets is what turns a cruel plan into a moment of undeniable revelation. When the groom invited his ex-wife to his wedding, he thought he was in complete control of the narrative. He believed he could manipulate how others saw her, poor, alone, and insignificant. But he had forgotten something essential. Truth has a way of appearing at the perfect moment, often carried by the most innocent among us, and in this case, truth walked in on 3 small feet at a time. The triplets represented everything he tried to erase. They symbolized responsibility, history, and the bond he once had but chose to ignore. Their entrance wasn't planned as a spectacle. It wasn't meant to expose or embarrass. They appeared simply because they were part of her life, a life he had walked away from, believing he could leave it all buried. But children have a way of bringing everything to the surface without saying a single word. As they stepped out of the limousine, dressed neatly, holding her hands, their faces glowing with innocence, the atmosphere shifted. Guests who thought they knew the story suddenly found themselves questioning what they had assumed. Up until that moment, the groom had likely portrayed a filtered version of his past. Perhaps he kept quiet about children, perhaps he told half-truths, saying the marriage failed because she couldn't support him or because she held him back. Maybe he never mentioned the sacrifices she made or the hardships she endured while he chased ambition. But the presence of those children cracked open the truth he had Hidden, children do not lie with their existence. They are living proof, living witnesses to the choices adults make. They reflect what has been nurtured, what has been neglected, and what has been abandoned. Their smiles, their confidence, and their comfort around their mother reflected that she had been the one raising them, caring for them, and carrying the weight of parenthood alone. Meanwhile, his shock revealed just how far he had distanced himself from that responsibility. The triplets also represented accountability. For all the groom's attempts to paint himself as someone who had outgrown her, someone superior to her, the children's presence showed that he had not outgrown anything. He had only run from it, and running from responsibility does not erase it. It simply waits for the right moment to reappear. The children were not a threat, yet their arrival exposed a chapter of his life he had hoped was closed. In many ways, children see the truth more clearly than adults do. They may not understand the complexity of broken relationships or the bitterness that comes with betrayal, but they know who loves them, who protects them, and who stands by them. Their closeness to their mother, walking confidently beside her, trusting her completely, spoke louder than any accusations could have. Anyone in that room could see that she had been their provider, their comfort, and their stability. What the groom failed to consider was that children reflect the strength of the parent who stayed. The triplets were healthy, welled, rest, and happy. A clear sign that she had done everything in her power to give them the life they deserved. She didn't arrive flaunting them. She didn't introduce them dramatically. She simply let them walk with her, as they naturally would in their everyday life, but their presence alone dismantled the image he tried to project. The guests, upon seeing the children, must have felt an immediate shift in empathy. Their perception of her transformed in seconds. Instead of seeing a poor ex-wife, they saw a devoted mother. Instead of seeing someone abandoned or forgotten, they saw someone who stood strong, raising 3 children with grace, despite everything she had endured. Her sacrifices became visible through the children's smiles. Children also carry emotional truth in ways adults struggle to express. The way they held tightly to her hand showed their reliance on her. The way they stood close to her showed their attachment. The way they looked around with innocent curiosity, unbothered by the tension in the air, showed that she had shielded them from bitterness. She had not filled their hearts with resentment. She had raised them with love, not with anger toward the man who wasn't there. This alone separated her character from his. She had chosen to protect them emotionally, to give them stability, and to surround them with love even when she had every reason to be bitter. The triplets reflected her strength, her dedication, and her ability to rise above personal pain for the sake of her children. In contrast, the groom's discomfort reflected his avoidance, his selfishness, and the truth he hoped no one would ever see. Children do not need to speak to reveal a person's story. Their presence alone narrates everything adults try to hide, and in this moment the triplets revealed. Her resilience, his irresponsibility, her devotion, his absence, her stability, his guilt. The contrast could not have been clearer. As the triplets stood beside their mother in that room filled with luxury and celebration, they unintentionally became the moral center of the moment. Not because they meant to, but because innocence always stands out when surrounded by deceit. Their presence made everything real, everything honest, everything undeniable, and truth, when carried by children, becomes impossible to ignore. Never underestimate anyone, because people are constantly growing, changing, evolving, and quietly rewriting the story others once assigned to them. In this narrative, the groom's greatest mistake was believing that his ex-wife would remain forever frozen in the version of herself that existed when their relationship ended. He assumed she would stay in struggle, stay in silence, stay in the shadows of his memory. He believed that because he had moved on materially, she had stayed behind emotionally. But life has a powerful way of showing that no one stays the same, especially not those who have walked through hardship with resilience. Underestimation stems from arrogance. It is rooted in the belief that we can predict another person's future based solely on their past. The groom looked at her through a limited lens, focusing only on what he had seen during their marriage, a partner who faced challenges, who didn't have wealth, who navigated life through sacrifice rather than luxury. He thought those circumstances defined her permanently, but circumstances can change, people can rise, strength can be hidden until the right moment reveals it. He underestimated not just her financial stability, but her inner growth. He failed to consider that she might have rebuilt her confidence, expanded her opportunities, or discovered new strengths in the years after their separation. He assumed she would arrive at the wedding carrying shame or insecurity. Instead, she arrived carrying herself with poise, accompanied by the very children he had overlooked, symbolizing a life she had rebuilt without him. When people underestimate someone, they reveal their own lack of awareness. They show that they are more focused on constructing illusions of superiority than understanding the true potential of others. The groom used his new wealth as a measuring tool, assuming that because she did not share that material rise, she must have remained stagnant. But personal growth is not always visible on the surface. It looks like late nights rebuilding confidence, quiet determination after heartbreak, moments of clarity after disappointment. These are things money can't buy and arrogance can't perceive. Her arrival challenged every assumption he had made. He thought she would appear embarrassed. Instead, she appeared empowered. He thought she would come alone. Instead, she arrived supported by 3 lives that reflected her strength. He thought she would remain the woman he once knew. Instead, she showed him the woman he never bothered to understand. Underestimation often happens when someone is too focused on their own rise. The groom believed he had upgraded his life. A new partner, a lavish wedding, expensive decorations. All of this fed his ego and nurtured the illusion that he was above his past. But what he failed to realize was that external upgrades don't automatically elevate internal character. He assumed his success made him superior, but true superiority comes from humility and compassion, qualities he lacked. Meanwhile, the ex-wife had grown in ways he couldn't see because he wasn't there to witness it. Growth often happens in silence, far from the people who once underestimated us. It happens in private battles, in determined efforts, in small victories that eventually transform a person from the inside out. The groom saw none of this, so he believed none of it existed. That was his blindness, not her limitation. Never underestimating someone also means acknowledging that people are unpredictable. A person who struggles today may rise tomorrow. A person who feels lost today may find purpose next month. A person who seems broken today may stand stronger than ever a year later. Life doesn't move in straight lines. It rises, falls, twists, and unfolds at its own pace. Groom thought he had figured out her fate, but fate has a habit of surprising those who think they know everything. Her entrance into the wedding wasn't just physically powerful, it was symbolic. She walked into the room representing change, proof that time transforms people in ways arrogance can't. Imagine, her composure revealed emotional growth. Her confidence revealed healing. Her ability to show up with grace revealed maturity he had never achieved. Everything about her contradicted his assumptions. Underestimation diminishes the one who does the underestimating, not the one who is underestimated. When he saw her walk in, every layer of his carefully constructed superiority began to crack. His face likely revealed shock, confusion, maybe even regret, not because she wanted revenge, but because reality confronted him in a way he could no longer control. People who underestimate others often fail to understand that adversity creates strength. She had gone through struggles he never acknowledged. Those struggles taught her resilience, patience, independence, and courage. Hardship didn't weaken her, it sculpted her. Meanwhile, his avoidance of hardship left him emotionally unprepared when confronted with her transformation. The guests, too, witnessed the consequences of underestimation. They saw her dignity juxtaposed with his discomfort. They saw her strength contrasted with his insecurity. They saw the truth he had hidden and the resilience she had built. In that moment, everything he assumed melted away under the weight of her presence. Never underestimating anyone means recognizing that people are capable of change, even profound change. It means understanding that life elevates those who continue moving forward, even when circumstances push them down. And in this story, she stood as the perfect example of someone who rose quietly while someone else convinced himself she never would. Her transformation didn't need applause. It didn't need validation. It didn't need to be performed. It simply needed to be seen. And when it was, it rewrote everything he thought he knew. In the end, this story is not about a wedding, a limousine, or even the shock that silenced an entire room. It is about the truth that finally stood tall. A man tried to rewrite the past by shaming the woman who once stood beside him. But life refused to cooperate with his cruelty. Instead, it lifted her up, placed her strength on full display, and allowed her dignity, her growth, and her children to speak for her. The groom thought he was inviting a weakness into his celebration, but what walked in was strength. He expected embarrassment, but what entered was elegance. Planned a moment of humiliation, but what unfolded was revelation. Life has a way of protecting those who rise with sincerity and exposing those who rise with arrogance. And on that day, the truth came not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through grace. And it was enough to rewrite the entire room's understanding of who truly stood tall. Her story reminds us of a lesson many forget. You cannot shame someone who has grown beyond your imagination. You cannot break someone who rebuilt themselves from the pieces you left behind. You cannot control the narrative when the truth walks in on its own legs. So let this be a lesson for all of us. Never mock someone's struggle because it might be the very thing that made them unstoppable. Never underestimate someone's silence because it may be the quiet work of transformation. Never judge someone by the chapter you walked out on because the story continued without you. And above all, never use your success to belittle another human being because success without character is simply an expensive emptiness. In this story, he tried to expose her, but ultimately he exposed himself, and she didn't need to say a single word to win, because sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones achieved simply by showing up as the person life shaped you to become.